The last known photo of Mark Dillard and Jenna Price was taken by a gas station clerk in Red Pine, Oregon. They were laughing, young, carefree, 22 years old, loading up snacks and firewood before heading into the Marble Creek wilderness. Locals remembered them as the Seattle couple, adventurous and always holding hands. That Labor Day weekend, they'd planned a 4-day backcountry hike along Ghost Hollow Trail. The route wasn't dangerous by normal standards, but dense woods, unstable cliffs, and spotty reception made it less traveled. When Monday came and no one heard from them, their parents grew worried. By Wednesday, search parties were called in. Helicopters, dogs, trackers combed the area, but no tent, no backpacks, no footprints. It was as if the forest had swallowed them whole. The only clue, a torn trail map found at the trailhead, circled in red near a section labeled Dry Vein Ridge. Investigators dismissed it as irrelevant. The case went cold within months, but some in Red Pine never stopped whispering about it. Couples don't just vanish without a trace, not in daylight, not together. For the first 2 years, their families clung to hope. Jenna's mother left porch lights on. Mark's brother returned to Ghost Hollow every summer, hiking mile after mile with nothing but a compass and blind faith. But no fresh clues ever surfaced. Media coverage faded, and the trail grew colder with every passing season. Rumors swirled, bear attack, accidental fall, even a lover's pact. One reporter from Portland suggested foul play, citing a strange radio transmission picked up by a fire tower days after their disappearance. The voice reportedly said, "They can't leave. The ridge took them." But it was dismissed as prank chatter. The forest, after all, had a reputation. Tales of people getting disoriented, compasses spinning, strange lights in the trees. Locals called it the Hollow Effect. Eventually, both families held quiet memorials without bodies. What else could they do? The woods had taken Mark and Jenna, and no one, not even trained search and rescue, could explain how or why. 18 years later, no one expected the case to reopen. But everything changed one September morning when Carter Mullins, a seasonal hiking guide and volunteer firefighter, decided to take a different route up Dry Vein Ridge. A landslide weeks earlier had exposed new terrain. Curious, he followed a narrow, broken animal path that split off from the main trail. About 2 miles in, the forest grew unnaturally quiet. Even the birds seemed to avoid the ridge. Then, just past a crooked pine, Carter saw it, a rusted aluminum kettle, half buried under moss. He crouched, brushed it off, and froze. The kettle had initials carved into the handle, JP. He radioed it in. What had been a dormant mystery was now burning again, and something about that ridge, about the unnatural stillness in the air, told Carter he'd just stepped into something far bigger than lost hikers, something that didn't want to be uncovered. When rangers arrived at Carter's location, they marked the GPS and cordoned off the area. The kettle was bagged and labeled, but Carter wasn't done. He kept walking further up the exposed ridge, heart pounding, feet crunching over gravel and roots. Just before sunset, he stumbled into what looked like the remains of a collapsed fire pit. Half-burned wood, stones arranged in a circle, and beneath one log, the corner of a blue nylon tarp. Carter didn't touch it. He just stared, pulse thudding. The color matched a brand from the early 2000s, exactly the kind Mark and Jenna's families had mentioned. He backed away slowly, snapping photos. The forest had hidden this for nearly 2 decades, and it took a landslide and one hiker's gut instinct to uncover it. But what chilled Carter most wasn't the objects. It was how untouched everything looked. No signs of wildlife disturbance, no overgrowth swallowing the area. It was like time had stopped the moment Mark and Jenna vanished. As if the woods had protected their last trace, or worse, preserved it. Detectives from the Cold Case Division arrived the next day. Agent Lina Cross, who had reviewed the file a decade ago during training, now stood where it all began again. She was methodical, sharp, and known for noticing details others missed. As she examined the tarp and the makeshift fire pit, she noticed something odd, a thin layer of ash that hadn't blown away, despite years of rain and wind. "This wasn't burned 18 years ago," she murmured. "Someone's been here more recently." That changed everything. If someone had returned, maybe to hide evidence, maybe for something else, it meant the disappearance wasn't just a tragic accident. It pointed to intent. Foul play. She ordered ground-penetrating radar for the area and requested search dogs. Something in her gut told her they weren't just standing in a place where something had ended. They were in the middle of where something had been paused and was about to resume. That night, Carter sat alone in his cabin, staring at the photos he'd taken. His dog, Bailey, paced nervously, ears twitching at sounds Carter couldn't hear. There was a heaviness in the air, like the forest itself was watching. He kept thinking about the way the birds had gone silent, about how the ridge had felt like stepping onto a stage someone forgot to clear. Then, just past midnight, Bailey began growling at the back door. Carter grabbed his flashlight and crept outside. Nothing, just wind rustling trees. But when he turned back, his breath caught. Someone had placed a folded trail map on his porch chair. He picked it up, circled in red. Dry Vein Ridge, same mark from 18 years ago. And beneath it, 2 words scribbled in trembling handwriting. "You're close." The ground-penetrating radar arrived with the morning mist. Agent Lina Cross stood quietly as the tech team swept the ridge. At precisely 10:43 a.m., the equipment registered an anomaly, 3 feet beneath the fire pit. Shovel teams moved in. Every scoop of dirt came slower than the last. Then, fabric, not modern, weather-worn, sun-stained. Beneath it, curled fingers. The site was secured. What they unearthed over the next 4 hours would shake even seasoned investigators. 2 skeletons, still partially clothed. One had a torn hoodie matching the one Jenna was last seen wearing. The other had a watch engraved, "To Mark, 2004. Confirmation was immediate. Families were notified. News crews swarmed. But Lina wasn't satisfied. Something was off. The bodies were laid carefully, side by side, arms touching, but not buried in panic. It was precise, intentional, as if whoever did it wanted them found, eventually, or returned them later. Forensics noted low decomposition for bodies presumed dead, 18 years. The question wasn't just who did this, it was, how long had they really been there? Carter returned to the ridge that evening, unable to shake the feeling that it wasn't over. He paced the perimeter as dusk settled in, flashlight in hand. He hadn't told anyone about the trail map. Something in him resisted sharing it yet. But something else drew him to the edge of the ridge where a thin birch tree leaned out like a crooked finger. There, he spotted something the others hadn't. Small, smooth stones arranged in a tight spiral. Fresh, no moss, no weathering. And in the center, another kettle, newer, shinier. When he bent to inspect it, a chill ran up his spine. Inside was a folded Polaroid. The image, 2 figures walking into the woods, blurry, taken from behind. Carter recognized Jenna's jacket. But the second figure wasn't Mark. It was someone taller, broader, wearing a wide-brimmed hat. Carter swallowed. Someone had been watching them back then. And worse, someone was still leaving signs now. Agent Cross studied the photo under forensic lights. There was no timestamp, but the paper was verified as vintage Polaroid stock from early 2000s. In the corner, almost invisible, were penciled initials. RD. Her memory flicked. In one of the original search reports, an old woodsman named Randall Deeks had filed a bizarre complaint days after the couple vanished, claiming he'd seen a man in a hat dragging a girl near Dry Vein Ridge, but no one took him seriously. He died in 2011. Cross pulled his file again. Photos of his cabin, journals. One journal entry read, "They always come back to the stones." She stared at the spiral Carter found. Was this a message? A ritual? Or worse, had someone used this ridge for more than one crime? And if so, had Mark and Jenna been the first, or simply the first noticed? Lina Cross took the Polaroid to a forensic imaging expert. Under infrared enhancement, they clarified the background. A tree scar with a distinct forked trunk and a slanted rock nearby. She cross-referenced old forestry maps and found the spot 2 miles north of the recovery site. That morning, she hiked out alone, armed and alert. The forest felt heavier. Birds stayed silent. When she reached the tree, she found the rock exactly as in the photo. Beneath it, disturbed soil. She dug with her gloves. A leather pouch emerged, cracked with age. Inside, a pocket knife engraved RD, a broken compass, and an unmarked cassette tape. She froze, old, but intact. Back at base, they played it. Static first, then faint humming, then a man's voice, calm, cold. "The forest is not mine. I only hold them, until the ridge says return." Lina paused the tape. The voice didn't match Randall Deeks, which meant someone else, someone alive, was part of this. Someone who saw the woods as something more than trees, a keeper, or a collector. Carter returned home late that night, unsettled. He couldn't stop thinking about the spiral, the kettle, and the fact that someone had left that trail map on his porch, without being seen. He checked his trail cam footage around the cabin perimeter. Most showed raccoons, wind, nothing. But at 3:12 a.m., the night the map appeared, one frame captured a blurred silhouette standing in the trees, not approaching. Just watching. Wide hat, long coat. The timestamp was precise, but the next frame was corrupted, pixelated into static. Carter leaned back, skin crawling. Whoever this was didn't just leave clues. They knew how to avoid being seen. That night, he barricaded the windows and kept a loaded flashlight next to his bed. But at 4:17 a.m., Bailey growled again. Carter grabbed his flashlight and opened the door. No person, just a small pile of rocks in the center of his porch, in spiral form. Agent Cross ordered the entire case reclassified as an active investigation with unknown suspects. She reread every line of Deeks' journals. One passage stood out. "They wear the hat, so you won't see their face. The face takes what it last saw." What did that mean? A superstition? A warning? The deeper she dug, the more people began reporting old stories. A ranger from 1987 claimed 3 teens vanished near the same ridge. A hiker in 1995 had a missing time episode. Left at noon. Returned at sunset with only 15 minutes on his watch. Cross plotted all sightings and disappearances around Dry Vein Ridge. The spiral pattern wasn't random. It formed a ring, and right at its center, an unmarked hollow, never mapped, never explored. She stared at it for a long moment. If the forest had a heart, this was it. She geared up. Next stop, the center of the spiral. Agent Cross entered the forest at dawn, guided only by a compass and the satellite printout of the spiral map. As she moved deeper into the trees, her radio crackled, then went silent. GPS dropped off too. She marked her trail with red tape, but the woods seemed to shift behind her. At precisely noon, she reached the center, a clearing unlike any other. Trees formed a perfect circle, all bent slightly inward, as if bowing toward a shallow stone depression in the earth. In its center lay an old wooden box. Cross knelt and pried it open. Inside, children's toys, small bones, and a notebook wrapped in plastic. On its cover, a hand-scrawled title, "Those the Ridge Kept." The pages inside contained first-person entries, accounts of being taken, of losing time, of waking to the sound of humming and being shown things in the dark. Some entries matched the years of known disappearances, but many didn't. Some were decades older. A pattern emerged. The ridge had been claiming people long before Mark and Jenna. Back in town, Carter couldn't shake the memory of the spiral on his porch. He drove to the ranger station and demanded access to any logs on weird activity around the Marble Creek area. A young intern named Milo hesitated, then offered something he wasn't supposed to. There's a drawer of unsolveds, stuff that never made it to the system. We call it the drawer of ghosts. Inside were yellowing incident reports, hikers reporting phantom whispers, sudden nausea, trails that looped endlessly, and dreams of someone watching from behind trees. One 1974 entry mentioned a woman in white leading lost campers into fog, never to return. Carter photographed everything. As he left, Milo stopped him. A man came asking about that drawer last week. Tall guy, long coat, didn't give a name. Just stared at the spiral map on the wall for 10 minutes. Then he smiled and left. Carter's stomach dropped. Someone else was tracking the pattern, and he wasn't just following. He was waiting. Cross set up camp near the spiral clearing, determined to hold through the night. She kept her weapon close and the notebook closer. As the sun dipped, a low hum began, barely audible, like wind through bone. Her flashlight flickered. She noted the time, 8:06 p.m. Then, from the edge of the tree circle, movement, not animal, too tall. It stayed just beyond light range, pacing. She raised her weapon. "Show yourself." The thing stopped. For a full minute's silence. Then a voice, raspy, male, familiar from the tape. "You brought light to what should stay buried." Cross took one step forward. The figure vanished, but on the ground where it stood, another folded map. Same red circle. This time with a date. September 9th. 4 days from now. Scribbled beneath, "Final return." Her pulse quickened. Whatever this was, it was counting down. Agent Cross returned to the ranger station with the notebook and the marked map. She had 4 days. She sent the map to the FBI Behavioral Unit for handwriting analysis and cross-referenced all disappearances listed in the journal. Patterns were clearer now. Victims often vanished during early September, all within a radius of 3 miles from the spiral's center. Most were campers, hikers, or off-duty rangers. Cross marked every known incident on a digital overlay and realized something chilling. The spiral was expanding. Each year, the pattern grew by several hundred feet. It wasn't random. It was spreading like a virus. Meanwhile, the Polaroid's ink was dated precisely to September 9th, 18 years ago. The same date now circled on the map. This wasn't just a countdown. It was an anniversary, a ritual, and something, or someone, was preparing to complete it. As she scanned the last journal entry, her hand trembled. It read, "The ridge doesn't just take, it teaches, it remembers, and on the 9th, it awakens." Carter's obsession deepened. After reading through more ghost files, he discovered a name repeated across decades: the Watchman. In handwritten complaints and ranger logs, the figure always wore a wide-brimmed hat, moved silently, and appeared near disappearances. Some believed he was a hallucination, others a myth. Locals passed down. But one 1982 report from a missing child survivor described him in terrifying detail. He looked like a man, but his eyes didn't blink. He spoke in riddles. He told me, "You'll be safe if you forget your name." Carter stared at the photo from his trail cam again. The blurred silhouette matched the same description. Was the Watchman the same person or entity behind it all? And if he was still active, was he merely watching or choosing? Carter began mapping his own disappearances. One thing became clear. Everyone taken had passed through Dry Vein Ridge within days of September 9th. He wasn't just near the edge, he was inside the ritual's radius. That night, Cross and Carter met in secret. She showed him the journal. He showed her the porch spiral. They finally said what neither wanted to believe aloud. Someone, or something, was reenacting a cycle. Mark and Jenna weren't the only victims. They were pieces in something larger, perhaps even sacrificed. Cross made a decision. We go to the hollow, together, on the 9th. Carter nodded. As they prepared, the forest shifted. Wind moved against the trees in spirals. Bailey refused to step outside. Phones lost signal, and somewhere, deep within the woods, a hum began to grow louder, low, rhythmic, almost like chanting. They had 3 days left, and the ridge was already listening. At dawn, on September 9th, Carter and Agent Cross entered the forest with full gear, trail markers, and 2 radios set to a private frequency. Bailey remained behind. The dog refused to go near the woods. They followed the spiral map carefully, taking a route no longer listed on public trail maps. After 4 hours, they reached the center again. Only now, the clearing had changed. More trees leaned inward. The spiral carved into the ground, burned into the earth like something had scorched it from above. At its center stood a tall wooden structure, new fresh wood, a totem-like tower wrapped in rope and feathers. On it hung personal items, necklaces, wallets, a child's shoe. Cross recognized one item immediately, Jenna's pendant, the one her mother said she never took off. It was clean, as if just placed. Carter whispered, "Someone's been here today." That's when they heard it. Not wind, not birds. A voice, low and guttural, whispering their names from somewhere just beyond the tree line. One voice, 2 names. They weren't alone. They raised their weapons and moved toward the trees. The whispering stopped instantly. Then came footsteps, slow, deliberate, circling them. Cross called out, "Federal agent, show yourself." No response. Only a scraping sound, metal against bark. Suddenly Carter spotted it, etched into the trunk of a black birch tree. A perfect spiral, fresh sap still dripping. Beside it, a symbol neither of them had seen before. An open eye, vertical like a reptile's, drawn in ash. Cross took a photo, heart racing. He's marking where he's been, or where he'll return. Then came movement to the right. A tall figure stepped out, obscured by the low morning light, wearing a wide-brimmed hat and long coat. No visible face, just a presence, wrong, heavy, like gravity bent around it. Carter took a step, flashlight raised, but the beam flickered. The figure didn't speak. It only raised one finger and pointed downward. The ground beneath their feet began to tremble. The earth gave slightly, revealing a hidden stone slab covered in moss. Together, they cleared it, revealing a hatch. Rusted, chained, but not locked. Cross hesitated. If we go down, we may not come back up. Carter said nothing, just pulled the chain free. The hatch opened with a groan that seemed too loud for such a remote place. Stale air rushed upward. A tunnel stretched into darkness. They climbed down, step by creaking step. The tunnel walls were marked with spirals and handprints, some small like a child's, others massive, unnatural. Then the tunnel widened into a chamber, and at the center, surrounded by dozens of burned-out candles, sat a circle of empty chairs. All faced inward. All had names carved into the wood. One said, Mark. Another, Jenna. And 2 were freshly carved, Carter and Lina. As the hatch slammed shut above them, the candles flared to life, one by one, without flame. The chamber's air grew thick. The candles burned without fuel, without scent. Carter stepped forward cautiously, studying the names on the chairs. Cross examined the walls. New carvings had appeared. not etched with tools, but almost pushed out from the stone, as if the cave itself was remembering. Among the markings were words in English and another, older language, spirals beside phrases like memory binds, return is owed, and the watcher holds the gate. In the center of the room lay a third kettle. Inside, a VHS tape labeled simply 9 to 9. They had no way to play it there. Suddenly, all the candles extinguished in a pulse, as if exhaling. Then came footsteps above, slow, heavy. The hatch creaked. Carter and Cross raised their weapons, breath tight. But the hatch never opened. Instead, from the wall behind them, a new tunnel emerged, stone groaning, reshaping. Something wanted them to go deeper, not leave, not yet. They entered the passage, now dimly lit by unseen light. The air grew colder, thinner. Carter's flashlight flickered but held. The tunnel opened into a cavern, natural, yet carved, as though generations had shaped it. There on a stone pedestal rested dozens of items, keys, rings, glasses, watches, all tagged with names from missing persons cases dating back nearly a century. Cross stared in disbelief. This is a burial ground. On the far wall, a massive spiral carved deep, almost shimmering. At its center, the wide-brimmed hat, placed like a crown. As they approached, the hum returned, now loud, resonating in their bones. Then a voice filled the chamber, not spoken, but felt. The debt must be balanced. The spiral began spinning, slowly, then violently. Carter fell to his knees. Cross screamed, and in a sudden burst of light, everything went white. When they awoke, they were lying on the forest floor. Morning sun filtered through the trees. The ridge was silent. No spiral, no kettle, no trace of the hatch. Carter checked his watch. It was still September 9th. Somehow, no time had passed, but in his hand was the VHS tape. Cross's phone, previously dead, now showed a new file, a video dated 9/9/2004. She opened it. Mark and Jenna, standing in the very cavern, terrified. Behind them, the Watchman, his hand raised, pointing. The message was clear. The forest didn't forget. It returned what it no longer needed, but only to replace it. Carter and Cross were alive, but now they were marked, and somewhere deep in the ridge, the Watchman waited, watching, choosing. Again, the forest gave up its secret, but not without cost. If justice means revealing what the world forgot, then some stories demand to be heard. Subscribe to Hidden Justice for more true stories, dark mysteries, and impossible truths. Stay alert. Some disappearances don't end, they begin.